Okay, so we're going to talk about biohacking today, and by we, I mean Giancarlo. So he's a local entrepreneur here, focused on neuroscience and head and neck, everything from the head and neck. There's a lot, we were talking before we got started here, and there's a lot going on. He's going to give us some tips, some stories, talk a little about wearables, talk a little about technology, talk a little about, I'm guessing, nutrition. I'm very excited because my diet of power bars and coffee is probably not the best biohack, but it's been working for me somewhat. So, Giancarlo, come on up. Let's hear your presentation.
Hello, everybody. All right, I'm going to set a timer because I've been known to talk too much. All right. Well, so who here has heard of biohacking before? Wow. All right, good. This is going to be easy. And just, you can yell out, what do you think about when you think about biohacking? Just yell it out. Performance. Yes. What else? Supplements. Mental. Yes. What else? I got my timer. I'm ready. Gadgets. Last thing. What else? Data. All right. And how many people are here? I heard a new term today, corporate refugees. Who here is like leaving the corporate world and they want to start something new and they're like, I want to do this on my own? Who's doing that right now? Okay, cool. Who's an entrepreneur starting something? We're already in the mix. Good. Oh yeah, okay. Who is a designer, techie, someone who wants to work with corporate people? All right, a few. Okay, so I just want to know my audience. And so what I'm hoping to do in the next 20 minutes is give you as much practical information I can give you so you can go out and like do things better tomorrow. But I'm going to start by giving you a big bird's eye view, curate some kind of key categories to think about, and then during the Q&A, we can kind of go deep into whatever you guys want. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Okay. So I'll tell you about myself in a second, but I love the brain. I'll be talking about it a lot. This is a great quote. The human brain has 100 billion neurons. Each neuron connected to 10,000 other neurons. Sitting on your shoulders is the most complicated object in the known universe. Right? And this is from a quantum physicist, like smart guy. Right? My other second favorite quote is: the human brain is a wonderful organ. It starts to work as soon as you're born and doesn't stop until you get up to deliver a speech, right? And so I'm feeling it, I'm gonna start moving, and then hopefully I'll get some traction. Okay, so this is me, this is my wife, my 3 kids. I basically have 2 bachelor degrees and a doctorate, and I'm those nerds that just keep learning. And so my first degree was in international relations with a minor in Spanish literature, right? I'm like, I don't like math, I don't like science, I want to just go learn about the world. And then, long story, I'll tell you another day, I was like, oh man, I love the body, I want to learn everything about it. And so then I had to take a lot of math and a lot of science, and it turned out I was actually pretty good at it. I started Vital Head and Spine. We're a head and neck applied neuroscience center, but my profession is chiropractic, but we deal only with the brain. And so we can go into that. And I'm also the co-founder of the Interprofessional Community of Pasadena. So these are a bunch of health professionals and all the different disciplines who get together and try to learn from each other and learn how we can take care of you guys better. So that's a little bit about me. This is, so I've been featured on TV and stuff. I've seen over 2,000 patients. We take care of Major League Baseball, NFL players. I work with over 230 different types of colleagues, so I have to learn about what everybody's doing. And we're involved in teaching and research in our office. Okay, so my hope though is 3 parts. I'll tell you quickly my story. We'll do a curated top 10 kind of general categories. And then during the Q&A, I'll help you guys kind of determine what would be your best top 3 to kind of move forward and like move the needle. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. All right. Okay, so briefly, my story. So in 2007, I graduated with a newborn newly married, newborn, and a lot of book knowledge, another baby on the way, and not a lick of business, right? I knew nothing about business. And so I decided to, of course, go and open my own practice and, and start my own business. And it was, hair pulling and probably one of the most stressful times of my life. But we did it. We started helping people with chronic migraines, chronic pain, and later on, eventually, a lot of post-concussion work. And so, but it was hard. After a while, so that was me back, that was like 10 years ago plus, and that was my firstborn, he's now 12. So we launched. I opened up the practice. We started taking care of old people, young people, babies, and we started getting a lot of people sending their babies to us. I won't explain the details. And then a producer from like a Ricky Lake show called. Anybody, you guys remember Ricky Lake? Yeah, like that was weird. That was like surreal. And so, but she's really bright woman, and actually a lot brighter than she is on TV. And so I get on TV and I'm adjusting babies, and they're colic and they're pooping and they're all like happy, and we started just getting a lot of people, and so our business really started to take off. We had people fly and come in to see us, and we were starting Arcadia, and then we came to Pasadena. Okay, so in 2016 I hit a wall. Okay, and so what that means is, on paper, I was really successful. We had a busy practice. Oh, that's you. That's you. It's okay. That's all right. We had a really busy practice. I was working just insane hours. I was on 3 boards. I had now 3 kids, and I wasn't doing any of it to the level that I wanted to do it at, right? I mean, do you guys ever feel like you're just stretched in every direction, right? And so, and I was just, putting in full throttle, and I thought, I like in the car, I was like on red, right? Like 7,000 RPM, beyond. I can't go any further. And any more that I do, something's gonna break, right? Either my kids haven't seen me in weeks, my wife's like, I don't know who you are. And again, I don't feel like I'm doing anything as well as I think I should, right? So it was this kind of, a moment of epiphany, and it was I'm either going to contract a lot. I'm either going to just start like cutting things out of my life, or I need to find a way to kind of actually shift the gear. I need a way to do things differently, not more, right? So just so that I know I haven't lost yet. Have you ever been there? Yes. Okay, you have, right? And so this was my wall. 2016 was that. This is me. I'm with my family. Everything was fun. But like there, I'm like, oh man, crap. Like I'm thinking about, whenever I'm at home with the kids, I'm thinking about what I have to do at the office. When I'm at the office, I'm feeling guilty because I'm not with my family. When I'm on the boards, I'm feeling guilty because I'm not doing the other stuff. It was just bad. Okay, so 2017, I decided, all right, I'm going to do 2 major things differently in my life. One, I'm going to apply some cool principles that I will talk about in a second, and I'm going to start to kind of double down on the stuff that matters the most, first order things, right? And 2, my limiting factor is me. It's my brain. It's my capacity. And so I had to finally kind of turn the lens back inward and say, what am I going to do differently about myself? I'm now going to invest energy, time, resources on my machine, right? Now, before that, I had kind of a blue-collar mentality. I was just push and just ignore myself, right? You see, Mike said it like, coffee and power bars, right? And so just float, like go float, like no way, I feel guilty if I'm gonna go just float for like, an hour, right? But no, it changed, things turned around for me. So, so I just started doing, everything. I'll go back. So I started doing everything. I started putting cool things on my head that like improves the blood flow to my brain. I changed my food. I exercised differently. I did brain maps. I did neurofeedback. I wore all kinds of sensors on my body and measured them. I played with everything. But my biggest, for me, and this is going to be for me, but it was pretty much as a business owner and as a doctor, it was what helps my brain so that I can work better and be more present and enjoy what I'm doing, right? It wasn't how I'm going to look. It wasn't any of that. It was, can I perform better in the areas that are important to me? Because I'm really, really purpose-driven. Right? So this is now, again, I have a 2-year journey, and what I'm going to do is distill these 10 areas, these 10 things that I think are the most important. And so this is my little one, and she, when I get up in the morning to go to the gym before work, she tries to bury herself in my gym bag and pretend she's not there. So I pick up my gym bag and I walk into the car, and she's giggling, thinking that I don't see her, right? But I'm carrying like a 40-pound kid, you know? So that's a photo of that. How are we doing so far?
Great.
Good?
Yep.
Okay, all right. So now, let's jump into it. Okay, so the top 10. So the first thing number 10 is this concept of nootropics. And these are basically supplements or drugs that help your brain work better, right? Now, there are 2 general categories for that. And so the general categories are either going to be things that help your existing biochemical pathways work better, or things that temporarily give you a jolt, right? I mean, I'm going to oversimplify things a lot for you guys, but that's one. Question, technically, how can I access my notes without them seeing it? Hard question. Oh, let's do it. Are you guys okay with that?
Yeah.
That way I, give you stuff. In the meantime, one quick question. Anybody have a question you want to make sure gets addressed? Yes.
I got a question for you, since you're going. I just read that City of Oakland has legalized magic mushrooms.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody said that these hallucinogenic substances that it does something.
Yeah.
Do you have any thought about that, or?
Okay, so great left field question. Thank you for that. In the bigger world of biohacking, and I'm trying to cater the biohacking to entrepreneurs who want performance, but I'm going to go there. There's psychotropic drugs seem to be really powerful at switching off something called our default mode network, which is this weird, crazy neural pathway that basically is like who I am and how I relate to the world around me, right? Well, all kinds of PTSD, fears of mortality, all these things are kind of linked into that default mode network. And so some great psychotherapists, and now at leading research institutions and leading universities are doing under controlled, now I don't know about Oakland, but usually it's under controlled environments. They'll do kind of these guided journeys with things like LSD and psilocybin, which comes from mushrooms. And they have found that there have been 2 studies I know of. One is with people that have terminal cancer, right? You're told you're going to die, and now you go home and you get to just ruminate about it all the time. And so they go through this process, and it opens up this perception to them. They see themselves as being part of a bigger universe, and they don't, and that this body is somehow not all there is. And it has astronomical benefits, proven through research, right? So that's one example of how it can be used in controlled environments. But I don't know about the City of Oakland. I didn't hear about it, or they're just like, hey, have at it, just go do it. Cool, but I think it can be really dangerous, especially on developing brains. Andrew Huberman is a neuroscientist out of Stanford, a friend of mine. He came and spoke at the other place down here in Pasadena, and he talked a lot about developing brains actually don't do very well with hallucinogenic drugs, and sometimes can really spark kind of psychotic events and breaks. So ideally controlled. Yeah. So, all right. Any luck? Yes. You're doing it. Thank you. Anything else? Yes.
You touched briefly on it. How did your wife and family handle all of this really high achieving lifestyle?
They're champs. But how do they handle it? My wife is super overachiever herself. We homeschool our kids, but it can only go so far, right? So how she handle it? I mean, frankly, when we had our second child, Gianna, so we have 3 kids. Elijah's 12, Gianna's 10, Ella is 6. She was born in November 2018. I opened my practice in September of 2018. I basically was not home for like the first almost 9 months of her being around, right? So it was extremely hard. And it's something that, as you guys know, I'm sure, it's this idea of balance, right? Sometimes doesn't exist. And so I had to learn to do things more efficiently, right? And that was a big thing. It was either contract or do things smarter, right? And so I didn't want to contract, so I did things smarter, but it was hard. Yeah, very hard. Okay, good. All right, we'll make it work. And where do I, now what am I looking at here? Oh no, it's a notes in the, all right, I'm just going to fly. Okay, so nootropics. So with nootropics, we have, this is what I would say. There are mushroom teas like lion's mane, not the mushrooms that you're talking about, that seem to be really helpful with focus and energy. There's a very well-known company called the number 4, Sigmatic. They have little packets. You can kind of drink it as if you were drinking coffee or like a cocoa. And it seems to be really, really beneficial, especially when you want either like big, sustained bouts of creativity, of focus. Lion's mane is a wonderful, wonderful natural supplement. There are pharmaceutical grade, there's prescription medication, and you'll know this about me, I really don't like most pharmaceuticals, it's just my own personal preference, but modafinil has been shown to be really powerful for helping people focus. Dave Asprey, considered the godfather of biohacking, it basically got him through Wharton Business School. He says it was the modafinil that helped him stay focused during these long, sustained periods of work. Believe it or not, caffeine is a nootropic, right? So it's not a bad thing, it's just may not be great on its own, right? Nicotine appears to be an amazing nootropic. Now, am I saying, you're going to leave here and say, look, Dr. Licata said it's great to smoke because it's really good for my brain. No, it's like the smoking has all kinds of other carcinogens and toxins, but the nicotine itself seems to dilate blood vessels and improve blood flow to the brain. So some people, I don't, because I just don't like it's addictive, that's what all there's to it, but some people will wear a patch when they're going to be doing things like this, right? So you decide where you're at. All right, so I'm going to do this. We need to get into here. Oh, you have Wi-Fi, great. Okay, then you should open. This one. It's labeled Friday. Okay, so that's nootropics. Any questions about that? No. All right. Don't worry about the notes. If you can just open it back up for me, I'm good. Oh, you got it. And okay, so how do we move that one? Don't worry about it. I'm good. I don't need notes. All right. Can you just link that? Great. Okay. And then let me just see one thing while you're doing that. Let me pull here. All right. Okay. Breath work. Number 2. Has anybody ever done any kind of breath work, breathing? Yes, right? Good. So breath work is probably also, what I love about it is it's free. It's free, right? There's nothing you ever have to spend money on. Breathing, there are types of breath work that change your physiology. the people in Tibet, the yogis in India have known this for thousands of years. It changes your physiology, number one. The other category of its benefit is it's a way for you to take the reins over your brain, right? And so what does that mean? You can take the reins over what you're going to focus on, how you're going to feel. It's through breath work. And again, it's free. Now, so there are different types of breathing apps that you can get. I'm going to list a few once we get there. Let me see here. I'll get it eventually. What's that? I think it is, yeah. So I just leave back there. I'll be good. Thank you. Yeah. So and so there's an app called Shift State. I'm just going to cut to. I'll usually list a bunch of them out and then tell you about it. Shift State is awesome. It's one of my favorite. I've bought 15 of them. I've lived in India for 9 months, where all I did was breathe and meditate and do yoga, and it's hard. It's not easy. And so the ability to have something, focus your attention, and go through different breathing techniques is really helpful. And so Shift State is really, really good. I still can't see it here. Okay. Okay, heat and cold is the next one. So heat and cold are really powerful things. Either take a cold shower in the morning, you'll wake up your brain in a second, you'll find that you'll be way more focused over the next 3 to 4 hours. Now, you can start with a hot shower and just end it with about 20 seconds of cold. Has anybody done saunas? Yes. Oh, okay, great. Infrared saunas? Yes, right? Good. And so, actually, so that has an amazing way of stimulating what are called heat shock proteins that literally jolt your physiology to wake up, and then the rest of the day, and sometimes the effects last multiple days, you're just firing. Like you're not dropping, you're not getting tired, you're not kind of like, oh, I gotta go to work, right? Your physiology is on, it's responsive. I do it every day. My kids will hear me screaming, I'm more like just trying to get sound out, but screaming every morning, right? My wife jokes and says the neighbors must think we must be having the most fabulous sex in the world because I'm just screaming at the top of my lungs every morning, right? So that's just, then I get a little bit about our family. Meditation and prayer is huge. And again, everybody talks about it, everybody knows it's important, but it's hard. It's hard, and so I try to help people just kind of get their foot in the door. And so there are tools that you can use to help. Now, there's guided meditation may simply be the easiest way to just jump right in, right? And meditation does something to the brain. It actually creates what's called coherence. All the different regions of the brain get all scattered. They don't fire at the same rate or at the same frequencies when we're kind of stressed out and thinking about a bunch of things, right? But, I mean, when you need that moment of just flow, creativity, you're writing a book, right? You're trying to think about your strategy for the next 2 years, right? You're writing a business plan. You want coherence. You want all of your brain firing and online, right? Now, so we can't just get it at will, but we can practice it. And meditation is a way of building the habit of coherence, right? And so there are 2 apps that are usually pretty helpful. There's an app called Calm, C-A-L-M, and then Headspace, right? People have invested millions of dollars in these companies. They're promoting themselves like crazy, but they work. They work. There's a whole nother side that'll come down later in the list called Neurofeedback, where literally you can hook up sensors on your head, measure the brain waves, and then real time find out if you're getting closer and closer to the target that you're looking for, right? It's probably also one of the most powerful hacks there are. All right, I'm gonna run with this. Who's heard of our microbiome? Yes, right? Who's heard of our gut-brain connection, right? Yeah. It's fascinating stuff. We used to think that we wanted to be away from germs, and we realized they're in us, they're everywhere, and they're doing most of the work for us. If somebody's depressed, it's really hard to be successful, right? I mean, it's like running your car at full speed with this huge, massive handbrake on, right? Or like walking through life with this huge boulder on top of you. It's hard. So serotonin is something that is very responsible for whether or not we're depressed or not. What we discovered, like I did anything bad, what research has shown is that our microbiome, little bacteria in our guts, stimulate cells in our inner lining that produce up to 90% of the serotonin in our body. 90%, right? The feel-good neurotransmitter dopamine. Has anybody heard of that? Cool thing, right? Yeah, it's basically the thing that makes us feel good is when we get a like on Instagram, right? It's actually part of our addiction pathway is dopamine. 40% of the dopamine is produced by bacteria and fungi in our gut, right? And so what we're discovering is that we can really influence our whole physiology by just getting our bacteria right. And if we've had antibiotics, if we, frankly now, just drink chlorinated water or glyphosate that's in everything, it kills that stuff out regularly. So what can we do? It's a hack, right? You want to ask me more questions about it? I'll dive into it. Technical things, I'm going to keep running. Are you guys okay with that? Okay, let's go through it. Measure. Okay, so an intrinsic part of biohacking is the idea of let me measure something in my system. Let me make an intervention. Let me measure it again. 5 minutes, thank you, all right? So there are different ways to measure. You'll see people keeping track of, what time they pooped in the morning, and, some people will keep track of how they feel. They'll answer questionnaires. I'm too busy, I can't do that. So there's all kinds of wearables. There's the Misfit, there's the Fitbit. The Fitbit, frankly, by now, is a dinosaur, right? If anybody's keeping track of how many steps they're walking, I'll tell you, it's time to move on. It's time to move on. They have not shown any correlation to our actual physiology, performance, weight loss, none of it, right? One of my favorites, since we're just jumping to it, is an Aura ring. It's this ring right now that I'm wearing, right? It measures my sleep, it measures my heart rate, it measures my temperature. I can know if I'm getting sick before I get sick. It measures my heart rate variability, which is another awesome thing I can talk about. And it links to my phone, and then it uses artificial intelligence to compare it, and then look back at my last, 150 days, and tells me kind of what it recommends I should be doing based on my own data.
What is that called?
Aura. So Aura, O-U-R-A. Aura ring. And they come in all kinds of cool things, and I've scraped the heck out of mine, and I love it. Right? So measure. All right, let's keep going. Gratitude, it rewires you. It changes you. You want to put on rosy glasses and see the world and not get bogged down. A practice of journaling, writing a letter. This is what they found. There was a neuroscientist who out of New York had shown this. If you write a letter to somebody that you're really grateful for, who just impacted your life, and you go in front of the person and you read the letter to them, that interaction not only gives them awesome feel-good mojo, right? It changes you for the next month, right? Talk about an amazing hack. You are uplifted, you're positive, you're inspired, you feel like you just dropped a huge load, and you have this energy to move forward and conquer the world, right? Like, that is so cool, right? Biohacking doesn't have to wear weird things on your forehead. This is a biohack, right? Exercise, real quick. BDNF, Brain-Derived Neurotrophic Factor. Up until about 20 years ago, people thought only kids grow new neurons and new connections. Adults were screwed, right? Can't teach an old dog new tricks. Turns out completely false. We can keep producing new neurons and new connections all throughout into almost death. Exercise is an amazingly powerful way to boost BDNF. In fact, long-distance cyclists, and this is not like Lance Armstrong's, but you and me who can do that, they have 4 times more BDNF than the average person just because they're doing it. Resistance exercise seems to also do it in different ways. If you don't like exercise, yoga can still do it, and what they call high-intensity interval training. 15 minutes on and off, on and off, on and off, seems to have the same effect, if not better, than long-distance work, right? So if you're too busy, do that. Neurofeedback. I liked it so much, we actually got it in our own office. It is by far one of the most powerful ways to go directly to the area of the brain, improve focus, executive function, reduce anxiety. In fact, for ADHD markers, you can literally see where the area of the brain is linked with ADHD. We've now seen about 100 clients. That's my son. He did it. He couldn't sleep. He could not get into, if I had more time to go into sleeps. We'll go into it. Okay, it's awesome. It's great. Sleep. When we sleep, we actually create short-term memory to long-term memory. We create growth hormone that repairs and regenerates our body. And we just discovered there's a system called the glymphatic system with a G. It's basically our brain's natural plumbing to get rid of metabolic waste of thinking all day long. If we don't go or don't have enough of deep sleep, meaning delta wave sleep, you can have 10 hours of sleep and it'd be crappy, and you have no delta sleep, you don't get the benefit. And so what happens is, if you're waking up already groggy, you're waking up and not feeling like you're regenerated or renewed, you're probably not cleansing out or getting rid. There could be other reasons, but you may not be getting rid of that metabolic waste, right? And what happens is, over time, it builds up. Brain fog, so on. It's horrible. All right. Eat fat, not sugar. Yeah. This is a cool Porsche Panamera. This is a hybrid car that has 642 horsepower, goes 192 miles an hour. Our bodies are hybrid. Our brains are hybrid. They use 2 types of fuel. We typically have been trained to feed it just sugar, 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 sugar. It kind of wants a little bit, and it doesn't do well with any more than that. Fats is what really sustains it. So those long power through meetings, the ability to get up early in the morning and be working through late at night. If this was probably, and that's why I put it as number 1, it's what I started with, and it had the biggest initial impact to kind of get me moving. All right, I apologize for the technical difficulties, but was this okay? Was this helpful so far? Yeah. Okay, all right. Okay, good. So we'll open up to questions and answers, and we'll just go from there.
Thank you. One more round of applause. So much good information. My takeaways to date are: do more mushrooms, either eating them or in tea, smoke cigarettes, and drink coffee.
Absolutely, yes.
And wear a ring.
Well said.
Wear a ring.
Well said.
Okay, so we're going to open up to Q&A. This is a great time to find out more about biohacking. Not a great time to talk about your experience with mushrooms. So John, here you go.
I'm going to add one more thing to that list, Mike. I'm going to order an extra side of bacon tomorrow morning when I have breakfast.
Yes, as you should.
Thank you so much. I was wondering what your thoughts are on intermittent fasting and how that impacts the brain.
Right. I think it's great. We were just talking about it with, what was your name again?
David.
David, yeah. Intermittent fasting is really, really helpful. And in combination with what's called metabolic flexibility, which is making our body a hybrid car. My body can burn fat or it can burn sugar, is really useful. What I tell people, and I didn't have time to tell David, is it's a little bit hard to do in the beginning. And so what I tend to tell people is I like to start on something that gets the ball rolling. That empowers me to do bigger things going forward. And so I say it's helpful, but usually like phase 2 or phase 3 of starting to make changes to your diet, right? So I'd say try to get metabolically flexible first and use intermittent fasting with it. So for those who doesn't know what intermittent fasting is, You guys all know. All right, okay. So then intermittent fasting is basically like not eat for 16 hours and then maybe eat for 8. But you're eating in a smaller window, right? I think it's good, but some of us aren't ready. And if we're not ready, we feel like crap. So test it. If you feel great doing it, keep doing it. If you feel like crap, hold off and just start getting your body to kind of get used to eating more clean fats, right? And there's a guy named Joseph Mercola. He just wrote a book on the keto fast, which is combining the two. There's another woman, her name is Naomi Whittel. I mentioned her. She wrote either a book or a documentary called The Skinny on Fat. And those are great books, and I think that Dave Asprey's coming out with another book because he talks about dirty keto, and so how to do it smartly. Yes? Who's?
Back here.
Okay, back there.
So I'm really more curious. There are millions of fad diets and fad everything, and not a lot of heavy, great, and particularly great long-term science on these things.
Right.
So the list you've just given us, what are the 4 or 5, or maybe 2 things even, because I doubt there's even 5, that have better long-term studies on what these effects are and how they actually affect us from a hard science perspective?
Yeah.
And are any of them have enough data that there are actually meta-studies on sub-studies?
Right, wonderfully said. So the short answer, well, there's a long answer to that. There's a lot of assumptions you're making there. But the short answer is, what's these things like clean keto versus non-clean keto, the bulletproof, the skinny on fat, these are basically meta recommendations based on a bunch of fad diets and things that don't work or work partially. So the challenge is that those long-term studies cost millions and millions of dollars. Usually large either corporate pharmaceuticals or big agricultural companies can fund those. So they don't usually do it. But so the short answer is there are enough lower studies that show that physiologically the mechanism works. Not a lot of long-term because we're just kind of getting into this, right? And meta is beyond the long-term, right? So let's talk about it in about 20 years and see. Yes?
3 more questions.
Yes, Pat.
So define clean fats.
Oh boy. So this is based on Dave Asprey's insight on this. So people go keto, which means I'm going to just stop eating sugar and eat anything else I want in this big group. And we usually eat the bacons and the hamburgers and things like that. And what we're finding out is that there are certain fats that go right to our physiological burning for energy. And then there's these other fats that just like clean fuel versus not clean fuel. Remember leaded and unleaded back in the day? So there are things that just spit off all kinds of crap. So that's kind of the short answer. But if you want, I'll stick around and we can talk about it more. Yeah.
Over here.
All right. Yes, here.
How much research are they doing into the difference between women's brains and men's brains? Because they are not the same.
Right.
I think it was a study in either Sweden or Norway where it said men tend to be dopamine deficient, women tend to be serotonin deficient. That's why the men get the ADD, women get depression. So do they analyze things like, like fasting is great for men, some women crash and burn?
Yeah. So real briefly, and thank you for mentioning the men and women part. Believe it or not, and again, I'm a little bit of a nerd. For fun, I read research papers. There actually still isn't enough. There aren't sufficient studies to actually show here's the difference between male and female. Like we don't see it. So a lot of it is basically based on behavior. But the short answer is when somebody goes keto, especially female, after about 30 days, their body, it shifts their hormones. And because you have more regular cycles, monthly, it can start disrupting hormonal balance pretty quickly. And so usually what happens is I feel fantastic on keto for the first month, and then I'm really miserable, and even if I kept going, I'd start getting some autoimmune deficiencies and some thyroid problems and some hormone changes, right? And so that's why there are people that are looking at this as a meta and say, well, let's start with the keto, but let's get you metabolically flexible so you can start bringing in some carbs as well, and make sure that you're balancing out your insulin so that you can kind of keep going and make this sustainable. So they're talking about a lot of alternating, and intermittent fasting and switching is part of that. But no, hardwiring, we still can't find it. But yet again, look, the human brain, we think we know it. And I'm with people from Stanford. We just had somebody come down from Columbia Med School, talk about mitochondria. We could spend all kinds of time on that. We think we understand. It is so much more complex, and the models we're using right now really, frankly, aren't the models of what the brain's actually doing. But they're working models, so we keep going with it. Okay? So, yes, Dave.
You mentioned nootropics and its effect on creativity, performance, focus. Would you say it would be addictive to take nootropics, and would it reduce our ability to be creative, focused on our own?
Yeah, some. And that's why there are two categories. So in my camp, what I like to do, I actually don't use any of the ones that would give you that temporary thing. I just don't like being addicted to anything. You know, I went to high school, a lot of my friends got addicted to stuff, and I saw what happened, and I don't want that in my own self. So I tend to like, there's a whole category of neurotropics that are just about understand the physiology. Now that's my job. But when you understand the system, then you know how to access the system in different directions to make the system healthier and thrive. And so when we understand like an assembly chain, assembly belt with a bunch of parts, if I know that I need certain things at different points to get the final result, then the supplements and the nootropics that I want are the things that help give me, that they fill in those gaps so that my body can spit out what it needs. Because what we think about in science is that I'm gonna do one input in my physiology and I'm gonna get one output. But it doesn't happen. It doesn't work that way. These are complex systems. So I put one input and I get like 50 different outputs. And that's just in my body. And we do a bunch of us and we start getting a lot of other different outputs, right? So I don't like the addictive stuff. I like the stuff that just help my brain. My body knows what to do. It's smarter than I can figure out. So yeah. Okay, how are we doing? Good?
One last question.
One last question, all right.
I'm going to ask it.
Oh, okay.
Hate to end this on a kind of a downer.
Oh,
but,
come on.
But it's about a month ago, I heard a neuroscientist from HMRI, Huntington Medical Research Institute, here in Pasadena, give a talk about dementia and Alzheimer's, and how our brains are shedding brain cells, and they've been doing some pretty novel things as far as how to reverse that. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, somebody came out with a statistic that they say that in the next 5 years, the prevalence of dementia will be 1 in every 1%. That all of us will be aging faster than the brains typically have in the past, right? Now that's wild, right? Now, so guess why I like this area, right? Like I want to optimize my brain to try to move the needle, right? And so so the very things we can do to optimize our brain to improve our performance so that we can be more successful, be more creative, have more focus, be less ADHD are the things that make our brain more resilient to things like dementia, right? Because that's really what most of biohacking is about, is building resilience and performance. So yes, there's a ton that you can do. Chronic inflammation appears to be one of the major underlying mechanisms of dementia. And chronic inflammation is our own immune system attacking itself over and over and over again, right? And there are lots of things that influence this complex system, right? Past head traumas, right? We work with a lot of chronic post-concussion work. The sugar is one of the most meaning it makes it worse, inflammatory thing we can put in our body. Alcohol is inflammatory. And then there's all kinds of other things like that. So the very thing, this is what's cool. So let's not end it on a downer. Let's end it on up. The very thing that we would be doing to improve our bodies and our brains so that we can be successful are the things that will help us avoid some of the things that if we just kind of did what everyone else did, we'd be going down that same road. So yeah, multiple benefits. All right, I'll stick around afterwards. I hope this is helpful, and we'll go from there.
Amazing, thank you.
photo of you.